I genuinely need to show you something that could completely change your SAT score. And if you skip this, you're making a huge mistake. And I will show you 4 powerful strategies to ace them. So let's get into it. So as you can see on the screen, there are 4 strategies you need to master in order to get your desired score. And there are also SAT questions that I've created so that you can understand how to apply it in a lot of the SAT questions. So here's the strategy number 1, which is understanding the skeptics' viewpoint. And here we've got a question. You can pause this video now and solve it on your own first. So without further ado, let's begin. Based on the text, the author of text 2 would most likely want to know if Whitman took steps to preclude which potential objection to the finding described in text 1. So firstly, let's read text number 1. So here you have one nation, and it's an indigenous group. It has used storytelling for 2 things: cultural preservation and education. They also launched a program. Then there's a study by some researcher. And they're telling that storytelling was better on comprehension assessment than a standard curriculum. So in short, text 1 claims that storytelling in education leads to better comprehension scores. Like storytelling equals better comprehension, and that's it. No more confusion. Now let's move on to text number 2. While studies on storytelling while they're really good, there's actually a negative thing, which is this: there are flaws in research design. And many of these studies lack diverse samples, so that's another disadvantage. And they also fail to account for pre-existing differences in students' ability, and they do not include proper control groups. And this is the third disadvantage, which is not proper group control groups. And that's why it's difficult to determine whether storytelling itself is responsible for improved comprehension scores. So in short, text 2 says, yes, storytelling is good, but there are research flaws. Like it says there are lack of samples, no control groups, and failure to account for pre-existing differences. We can infer that we can say it has text 2 is skeptical about whether storytelling is actually the cause of improved comprehension scores, or maybe some other factors might explain that difference. So now we know it. Let's move on to answer choices. Choice A: the students would have demonstrated even greater improvement if storytelling techniques had been used for a longer period. I mean, this is irrelevant because we don't care about time, whether it's short or long. We don't care about that, so that's why A is wrong. Choice B: the students would have performed worse on comprehension assessments if the study sample size had been smaller. Yeah, sample size matters, but the primary concern is not a sample size. It's more of a causation. That's why it's not a main concern for us. So that's why B is also wrong. Choice C: the students would have shown improved comprehension scores regardless of whether storytelling was used. Well, this is exactly what we thought, because there are no control groups and they don't know whether they have knowledge or not. They didn't assess the students' ability initially. That's why this choice is correct. Now let's move on to choice D. The students would have responded to storytelling differently if they had not known they were part of the study. I guess it might be true according to my brain, but in the text, there's nothing about it. That's why choice B is wrong. So that's why the final answer is choice C. And the strategy was understanding the skeptic's viewpoint, and you might not have understand it clearly. And I will try my best to understand it. I will try my best to explain it to you. So the second passage here is almost challenging or criticizing the first passage. And your job is to identify the main concern being raised because text 2 is criticizing it. That's what the viewpoint of a skeptic is. Here, skeptic is text number 2. Another thing that a lot of students miss is that they don't really look for causal relationships. For example, X will cause Y. And this is something that can explain the results of a study or something else. I mean, which is also something that you need to understand. Now let's move on to strategy number 2, which is paying attention to shifts in the passages. And I've seen this a ton of time being used on SAT questions. And here's the SAT question. You can pause the video now and you can solve it on your own first. So based on the text, the author would most likely agree with which statement about student engagement. So now let's read the text. In the past decade, online education platforms have expanded rapidly, with many institutions offering video-based courses. A widely accepted model in educational research suggests that student engagement is primarily determined by course format. Interactive courses, discussion-based or problem-solving activities lead to higher engagements than passive lecture-based courses. So they were telling you that interactive courses will lead to higher engagement than like passive lecture-based courses. However, here you have a shift in our passage. So that's the thing that I wanted to talk about. However, nevertheless, and sometimes you also have to look for some linking words like therefore, as a result, because they also say something important. A study conducted by researchers at Global Ed found that while interactivity played a role, other factors such as the quality of course materials and students' personal motivation also significantly influence engagement levels. So it's saying that it was not just because it was an interactive course, it was not just because of those discussion-based and problem-solving activities, but it was because of the quality of course materials like those worksheets and PDFs, and the students' personal motivation also played a crucial role in the engagement level. So now let's look at choices. It can explain some, but not all the differences in engagement levels across students. Well, yes, that's true because course format plays a role. That is true, but there are also some factors that matter, and it's saying the exact same thing. Well, the passage never said course format is irrelevant. It just says it's one of several factors. And this choice is too extreme. That's why we can eliminate choice B. Now let's move on to choice C. It's often affected by course format, but not for the reasons assumed by the widely accepted model. Well, this is tricky because the passage does challenge for the model, but it doesn't say the reasons for engagements are completely different. It just adds more factors, and this is especially right, but it's kind of the best because, as I said, it doesn't say the reasons are completely different, but it says there are more factors. That's why C is wrong. Choice D, it constrains how much time students spend on coursework, but not how engaged they are. Well, the passage is about engagement. It's not about time spent. That's why we can eliminate choice D results. So the final answer is choice A. And as I said, with the strategy, the tip is paying attention to shift in the passage. For example, when it challenges, like usually in the passage, there will be the last sentences that will challenge a widely accepted idea that was discussed in the first sentence. And you should definitely look at these words like however, but, nevertheless, and etc. Now let's move on to strategy number 3, which is always breaking the passage into different parts. And this is so crucial. And if you do this right, you can ace your exam. So here we have a transition question that I've created. So you can pause the video right now and you can solve it on your own first, and you can play the video and watch my explanation. So this is a transition question, and you need to understand that our job here is to understand the logical flow of the passage here. And we should also identify the relationship between the ideas in this passage. So let's read it. In 1961, NASA launched its first program. As part of the program, the spacecraft was first positioned onto a launch pad. The engines were ignited, generating massive thrust. Finally, the rocket ascended into the sky, leaving Earth's atmosphere. So, firstly, it was positioned on the launch pad. Then, engines were ignited, and then the rocket launched into the sky. So, in this case, there is a sequence of events. First this, then this, and finally that's something else happened. So that means you're looking for a transition word that shows a step-by-step progression. So I believe that we need a phrase that should show the next step in a sequence. Now let's move on to answer choices. A, for example, well, for example, it's used to introduce an example, but we're not giving an example here. You are describing steps in a sequence. That's why choice A is wrong. Choice B, next. Well, yeah, this fits perfectly because we are describing events in a sequenced order. And the spacecraft was positioned, then the engines were ignited. So it makes sense, right? That's why choice B is the correct answer choice. But still, let's move on to other choices. Similarly is used to compare two things in a positive way. And here, if you're not making a comparison here, you're just showing progression. That's why choice C is also wrong. In contrast, it uses to show difference or opposition, and it's not something that we want here, so that's why D is also wrong. The main thing, and this is a kind of an easy example of transition question, but if you're gonna solve hard transition questions, then you need to recognize three types of transitions. So the first category is addition, which includes moreover, additionally, and etc. And they are used to add a new idea. And then the next type, the second type of transition type is sequence, which is next, then, firstly, lastly, finally. And they show order in a process or sequence. And next up, you have contrast. However, on the other hand, like so many of them, and shows difference. Now let's move on to the next strategy, which is checking for direct evidence. And you will understand how to apply it in a lot of SAT questions when we kind of move on to this SAT question. You can pause the video right now. You can solve it on your own, especially if you're taking the exam. These questions are going to be so useful. Yep. So it asks for information detect that supports which statement about historical climate data. So let's read the passage first. So they analyze historical climate data. So they started talking about it. Information gathered from ice cores, tree and etc. to explore long-term patterns of temperature change. That's also something that is important. Although this method provides valuable insights such as revealing past periods of extreme warming, so this method is good. Well, it shows past periods of extreme warming, but it's not widely adopted. Like a lot of people don't use it, right? Because the data is often incomplete, and now they're telling a reason why a lot of people don't use that historical climate data. A challenge that current climate modeling techniques struggle to overcome. Okay, so I guess my prediction here is that the passage tells that this data, historical climate data, can provide unique insights, but many people don't use it, right? Because of incompleteness. Now let's go to answer choices. Choice A, it may provide insight that other types of climates data cannot. We know that it can reveal past warming trends, meaning it provides unique insights. So let's keep choice A. Choice B. Choice B. It has thus far proved valuable mainly to researchers studying glacial movements. Well, there is nothing about glacial movements. So we can literally eliminate choice B easily. Next up, we have choice C. It may be underused because of its controversial status among scientists. This is a little bit of a tricky answer choice, and that's a trap answer choice. Why? Because the passage says they are underused. Not a lot of people use it because of incompleteness. It's not because of controversy, and we don't know whether whether there is controversy or not. That's why you can eliminate choice C as well. Now let's move on to choice D. It tends to be much more fragmented than other types of climate data of comparable age. We know that there is incompleteness in that data type, but the passage doesn't compare it to other climate data explicitly. That's why you can eliminate D as well. So the best choice here is choice A. It may provide insight that other types of climate data cannot. So my best tip is be cautious of extreme or specific answer choices. For example, if an answer choice adds an extra detail that is not in the passage, well, you can understand that it's probably wrong. All of these 4 strategies don't matter if you keep making the same mistakes that you're doing over and over and over again. And that's why I made this video right here where I shared 5 major mistakes that a lot of people are making.